Welcome to this deep dive video on snapping. We'll explore everything related to snapping within the object mode. We'll start with the increment mode because it's usually selected by default. To enable snapping, make sure this magnet is turned on. When active, you don't need to hold control to snap, but you can hold control to disable it temporarily as long as you hold it. A visual indicator here will show how much an object snaps in each direction: position, rotation, and scale. In increment mode, snapping is based on your camera's distance. When viewing orthographically, the snapping resolution depends on whether you are zoomed in or out. Like centimeters, tens of centimeters, or meters. In perspective view, it snaps to meters regardless of your camera's proximity. Some online tutorials suggest changing the unit scale under the scene properties. However, this isn't the correct approach. It redefines what is considered a meter, making things appear smaller but not actually refining the snapping resolution. For example, this trunk is now 3.5 times as big as before. Never do it this way. To genuinely make snapping finer, adjust the scale setting itself, here on overlays. Then you can see it moves in smaller steps, now for real. The default here is 1.0. When increment is on, it snaps to the set increment distance of your viewport zoom level, based on the last position of your object. However, if you activate grid, it will snap to the grid according to where the cursor is in 3D space. In Blender 5.2, there's a new option, Absolute Increment Snap. This makes the increment snapping behave more like grid snapping, but independent of mouse position. We've now covered increment and grid snapping. Let's move to vertex snapping. Mesh objects have vertices, this corner points. With vertex snapping enabled, you can align objects to these points, especially on corners. If there are no vertices where your cursor is, it won't snap. You can change the behavior, what is snapping. For example, I want the object origin snapping. I use active snap base here. In object mode, it is the most useful one. This makes snapping the origin, the orange dot, snap to a vertex. With this enabled, I can also snap the trunk to the stump. Because I have a vertex here on the stump. Without the vertex, it wouldn't work. The same applies to edges. Meshes also have edges, so you can snap to them too. Things get interesting with faces. This helps place objects on the ground. But what if the ground is uneven? Then it looks messy. So we can enable align rotation to target. Now it moves with the ground. This can be fun. Let's try this with the branches. It also works with vertices, but I don't have vertices everywhere, but faces. So I'll use face here. Then I can snap this branch here and build a tree easily. There's also volume, similar to faces but snaps to the object's volume. For example, this branch would snap into the volume here. I did cursor to selected so it's clear. Backface. Culling is another option. It prevents snapping to the backside of objects. Only the front faces snap. This is useful for smooth interactions. You can also enable this for rotation. You need to activate it. Both can be used together, rotate and scale. Rotation goes in 5-degree steps by default, and scale by a multiplier of 0.1. So, why did I choose active? Because if you hold Shift to select two things, the last one becomes active. You see it by orange and yellow outline. Orange is selected and yellow active. You can only have one active object at once. It's helpful for precise snapping. For example, if I select Face Snap, it becomes the basis for snapping. When you use Closest, the selection, regardless of active or not, snaps to the closest point of your mouse cursor. What's maybe interesting, you can also snap to the center of a face. You can see here, faces have, of course, a center point, and you can snap objects to it. What's part of object mode snapping, but also a bit of edit mode? I'd say it's this 3D cursor. This cursor, which we move with Shift plus right-click, can also be snapped to objects. For example, in edit mode, Vertex Select, I can move it here using Shift plus S and cursor to selected. Then, in Object Mode, switch with Tab, I can use Shift plus S and Selection to cursor again to move it here. It has other practical uses, like centering this to close the bottle. Since there's nothing to snap here, it's a hole, I'd have to manually set it. Or I could select the edges and use cursor to selected. As long as the origin is in the center, if not, set origin to geometry or origin to 3D cursor for a specific point. The origin is already correct, so I use selection to cursor, and it'll place it exactly in the center. If, for some reason, the origin is here, well, it won't work. So set origin to geometry, or pick a point with cursor to selected. Then set origin to 3D cursor. Now repeat, cursor to selected. Make sure you're in the right mode. Selection to cursor. It's a bit higher because the cursor is at the bottom, but just a tiny adjustment to fix. That's how snapping works in object mode. Thanks.